The soft sound of piano keys floated across the quiet hotel lobby. It was late, long past the time when most guests had gone to bed. Only a few people sat around, some scrolling on their phones, others quietly talking over coffee. At the corner of the lounge, a young woman sat at the piano, her fingers moving gently across the keys. Her name was Lena Morales. The hotel wasn't fancy, but it was decent. Clean marble floors, warm lights, and a grand piano that had seen better days. Lena had been playing here every evening for the past 6 months. It wasn't her dream job, not even close, but it paid just enough to cover rent and groceries, and it gave her a reason to keep playing music. Even when she felt like giving up. She always started with soft classical pieces, Chopin, Debussy. Sometimes her own small melodies she'd written when she couldn't sleep. She didn't have sheet music most nights. She just played what she felt. Some guests noticed, most didn't. Every night felt the same. She'd arrive at 6, play until closing, nod politely to the waiters, and take the last bus home. Life had become a slow rhythm of repetition, notes, keys, and silence. But on this night, something different was happening. The hotel was unusually busy. The lobby was filled with people in suits, long dresses, expensive watches, and sparkling jewelry. There was laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the sound of cameras flashing. The staff moved quickly, adjusting decorations and offering drinks. Lena overheard one of the waiters whisper, "A private event tonight. The boss himself is here. Some billionaire from the city booked the ballroom." She didn't think much of it. Big events often meant guests spilling over into the lounge, maybe a few extra tips. She adjusted the microphone near the piano and kept playing softly, trying to stay out of the way. As the evening went on, more people walked through the lobby. The air smelled of expensive perfume and cigars. A group of men stopped near the piano, talking loudly about investments and stock prices. One of them looked over at Lena and smirked. "Hey, play something fancy," he called out, half joking. Lena smiled politely and started playing a livelier tune. They didn't clap, but one of them tossed a folded bill onto the piano before walking away. She didn't even look at it. She was used to that kind of half-hearted attention. Around 9, she noticed a man enter the room surrounded by others. He was tall, gray-haired, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. He had that kind of presence that made everyone stop talking when he walked in. That was Alexander Drayson. She didn't know who he was at the time, only that everyone seemed nervous around him. The manager rushed over to greet him with a handshake that looked too eager. The man nodded slightly and kept walking, his eyes sharp, observant, like someone used to getting his way. Lena kept playing, but her curiosity made her glance up a few times. He didn't smile. He looked like someone who had seen too much, achieved everything, yet still carried a weight that nothing could fix. After a few minutes, the group moved into the ballroom for the private party. The doors closed behind them and the music from inside started, loud, cheerful, full of laughter and celebration. Lena went back to her quiet tunes. Time passed slowly. She checked the small clock on the piano. 10:15. Just 45 more minutes before she could pack up and go home. Her fingers ached, and her mind wandered to the leftover soup waiting in her fridge. Then she heard the ballroom doors swing open. A few people came out, talking and laughing. Then came the billionaire himself, followed by 2 men who looked like bodyguards. He stopped in the middle of the lounge and looked around as if he was bored. His eyes landed on Lena. The room fell quiet again. Even the waiter behind the counter froze. Alexander Drayson walked closer to the piano, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He stood there for a moment, watching her play. Lena felt the pressure of his stare. Her hands slowed slightly on the keys, but she kept playing, pretending not to notice. She'd learned long ago that showing nerves only made things worse. After a minute, he said in a calm, deep voice, "Play something real." The room went silent. Lena blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "I'm sorry, sir?" she asked softly. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "You heard me," he said. "Play something real. Not that hotel lobby nonsense. Something worth listening to." Her heart skipped a beat. Everyone was watching now. The waiters, the guests, even the receptionist. She swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm just hired to play background music," she said carefully. "Then surprise me," he interrupted. "Show me something they don't pay you for." There was a pause. Lena looked down at the piano keys. Her throat felt dry. She could feel her heartbeat pounding in her chest. She'd been embarrassed before. People requesting silly songs, laughing at her playing, asking her to stop mid-performance, but something about this moment was different. This wasn't just about a song. It felt like he was testing her. Everyone waited for her to react. She took a slow breath and nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll play something real." Her fingers hovered above the keys. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She closed her eyes, searching for something inside her that she hadn't touched in a long time. And then, she began to play. The first notes came out soft and fragile, almost trembling. She chose a song she'd written years ago, one she'd never played for anyone else. It didn't have a name. It was something she'd written after her mother died, a piece full of sorrow, love, and the ache of unfinished goodbyes. At first, the sound seemed too quiet for the large room. But as she continued, her hands grew steadier. The melody deepened, rich and emotional. It was the kind of tune that pulled you inward, like a memory you didn't want to remember but couldn't let go of either. The billionaire said nothing. His face softened slightly, but his eyes stayed fixed on her hands. Lena didn't notice the crowd forming again. Guests who had been chatting by the bar now turned their heads toward the piano. Even the servers stopped to listen. The music changed, rising, falling, weaving through pain and peace. Every note felt like a confession. She played as if the keys could hear her thoughts, as if her mother was somewhere in the sound. When the last note faded, the silence that followed was heavy. No one spoke. For a moment, Lena wondered if she had done something wrong. Maybe it had been too sad for a party. She looked up, ready to apologize. But Alexander Dreisen was just standing there, still and quiet. His expression was unreadable, but something had changed in his eyes. The arrogance, the boredom, it was gone. In its place was something softer, something almost human. After what felt like forever, he finally spoke. "What was that?" he asked, his voice low. "It's something I wrote a long time ago," she said. He looked down at the piano, then back at her. "You wrote that?" She nodded. He stared at her for another moment, then turned to one of his assistants. "Get her name," he said simply. Before she could even react, he walked back toward the ballroom, leaving her sitting there, stunned. The others followed him silently. The crowd slowly began to move again, whispering to one another. One woman near the bar wiped a tear from her cheek. A man clapped softly as if afraid to break the mood. Lena sat still, her fingers resting on the piano keys. She didn't understand what had just happened. The hotel manager came rushing over, excitement written all over his face. "Lena, do you know who that was?" he whispered. "That's Alexander Dreisen. He's one of the richest men in the country. He owns half the companies in this city." She nodded slowly. "I figured he was someone important," she said quietly. The manager grinned nervously. "He asked for your name, did you hear that? You might have just impressed him." But Lena wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. She'd seen powerful people before. They were unpredictable. After everyone went back inside the ballroom, she sat there for a few more minutes, staring at the piano. The air still felt heavy with the sound of her music, even though the notes had long faded. She finally closed the lid and packed up her small bag. Her fingers were still shaking. Outside, the city was quiet. The streetlights reflected on wet pavement, and the night breeze felt cool against her face. She walked slowly to the bus stop, her mind replaying the scene over and over again. The billionaire's words echoed in her head. Play something real. She had. And for a few brief minutes it felt like the world had stopped to listen, but she didn't know what would come next. When she got home, her small apartment felt even quieter than usual. She put her bag down, kicked off her shoes, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her hands still tingled from playing. She looked at the small framed photo on her bedside table. Her mother, smiling beside an old upright piano. That was where it all began. Her mother had taught her how to play when she was 6. Back then, music wasn't about money or approval. It was about love. For years, Lena had chased that feeling again, the pure joy of playing for someone who truly listened. But life had turned her passion into survival, until tonight, someone had finally listened. She didn't know why the billionaire had reacted the way he did, or if it meant anything at all. Maybe he'd forget about her by morning. Maybe she'd just go back to playing for half-empty lobbies and strangers who barely noticed. But deep inside, something had shifted. As she lay down that night, she thought about the way the room had gone silent. The look in his eyes, the feeling in her chest when she played those notes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She closed her eyes, the last echoes of her song playing softly in her memory. And somewhere across the city, in a high-rise apartment filled with glass walls and silence, Alexander Dreisen stood by his window, staring out at the lights below. The sound of her piano still lingered in his mind. He didn't know her name yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He would hear that song again. The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy with clouds. The city felt quiet, like the world had decided to take a slow breath. Lena woke up later than usual. She lay still for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling. Her apartment was small and a little messy. Sheet music piled on the table, a cracked mug on the counter, and a window that didn't close properly. She didn't mind. It was home, but this morning felt different. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the night before. The look in that man's eyes, the silence after her song, the way he'd said, "Play something real." It had felt like a challenge, but also something deeper. Like he wasn't talking to her as a stranger, but as someone who understood what it meant to hide your truth behind polite smiles and quiet work. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. The clock on the wall said 9:45. Usually, she'd be getting ready to leave for her part-time job at the music store by now, but she had the morning off. She walked to the small kitchen, poured herself some coffee, and opened her phone. There were a few new messages. One from the hotel manager. "Lena, please come to the office before your shift today. Something important." Her stomach tightened. Important usually didn't mean good news. She showered quickly, brushed her hair, and pulled on a plain white blouse and dark jeans. Before leaving, she grabbed the sheet of paper where she'd written the melody from last night, the one she'd played in front of everyone. She didn't know why she brought it. Maybe it was a kind of armor. When she got to the hotel, the lobby was already busy. Businessmen in suits, tourists checking in, a few families with kids running around. Everything looked the same, but the staff's eyes followed her as she walked by. The manager, Mr. Cole, was waiting near the reception desk. His face lit up when he saw her. "Lena!" "There you are," he said, waving her over. Come, let's talk in my office." She followed him, feeling a little nervous. The moment the door closed, he turned to her with an excited smile. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Do you remember Mr. Dreisen from last night?" Of course she did. How could she forget? "Yes," she said quietly. "He asked me to play something." "Real?" The manager laughed nervously. "Yes, well, it turns out he really meant it. His assistant called this morning." Apparently Mr. Dreisen was impressed. Lena blinked. "Impressed?" Mr. Cole nodded quickly. "He wants to meet you personally." Her mouth went dry. "Meet me?" "Yes, his office is in the city center. He said he wants to discuss something about your music." Lena stood frozen, unsure what to say. This couldn't be real. Billionaires didn't just invite hotel pianists to meetings. The manager leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Lena, this could be big for you. I don't know what he wants exactly, but if he's interested in helping, this might change your life." Her mind swirled. A part of her was curious, another part cautious. She didn't trust rich people easily. She'd seen enough of them at the hotel, always polite, always demanding, rarely kind, but something in her heart told her to go. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning," the manager said. "His driver will pick you up. Just be ready at 9, she nodded slowly. "All right." The rest of the day passed in a blur. She played her usual shift, but the songs didn't sound the same. Her fingers kept slipping, her thoughts kept wandering. Every time she looked at the clock, she felt her stomach twist a little more. By the time her shift ended, the nervous excitement had turned into a storm of thoughts. What if it was nothing? What if he just wanted to mock her again? What if this was some kind of joke? But what if it wasn't? That night she sat by the window with her old keyboard. The city lights flickered outside. She played quietly, going over the same melody again and again, the one from last night. It still carried the same ache, but now it felt like a door had opened somewhere. She didn't know what was behind it, but she was about to find out. When morning came, she was ready early. She wore a plain black dress, not fancy but neat, and tied her hair back. At exactly 9, a black car stopped in front of her building. A driver stepped out and opened the door for her. The ride was silent. The city rolled past, shops, glass towers, and streets she rarely visited. When they arrived, the building was taller than anything she'd ever seen up close. Glass and steel shining under the cloudy sky. The driver led her through the lobby and up to the top floor. The elevator doors opened to a quiet office that looked more like an art gallery than a workspace. There were large windows, white walls, and a grand piano sitting in one corner. And there he was. Alexander Dreisen stood by the window, staring out at the city below. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Miss Morales," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Thank you for coming." She nodded politely. "Thank you for inviting me." He motioned toward a chair. "Sit." She sat, her hands folded in her lap, trying not to look too nervous. He studied her for a moment, his expression serious. "You played something last night that I can't get out of my head," he said. "That piece, it wasn't ordinary. It had truth in it." Lena didn't know what to say. She lowered her eyes slightly. "It's something personal," she said softly. "I wrote it for my mother." He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. Then he said, "Do you know why I asked you to play that way last night?" She shook her head. "Because I was surrounded by people," he said quietly. "And yet I felt completely alone. I wanted to see if someone in that room could make me feel something real again." "You did." Lena looked at him, surprised by his honesty. There was no arrogance in his tone now, no challenge, just quiet truth. He walked over to the piano and touched one of the keys gently. "Music used to mean something to me," he said. "My wife played. Before she passed away." The room fell silent. "I haven't listened to a piano since," he continued. "Until last night." Lena felt her chest tighten. She understood now. The sadness she'd heard behind his eyes wasn't arrogance, it was grief. He turned toward her. "I want you to play for me again," he said simply. She blinked. "Now?" "Yes, play what you feel." "Not what you think I want to hear." Her hands trembled slightly as she walked to the piano. She sat down, took a slow breath, and let her fingers find the keys. This time, she played something lighter, a melody full of hope, like a sunrise breaking through gray clouds. It wasn't written on paper. It was something she built in the moment, a piece that carried warmth instead of sorrow. As she played, she felt the tension in the room change. The air softened. When the last note faded, she turned and saw that he was no longer standing. He was sitting, eyes closed, lost in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "You have a gift, Miss Morales. But gifts like yours don't survive long in hotel lobbies." Lena smiled faintly. "It's the only place that lets me play." He gave a short laugh. "That's about to change." She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He stood and walked to his desk, picking up a business card. "I'm organizing a charity gala next month. Big names, journalists, investors. I want you to perform there. One song, your song." Lena's heart jumped. "Me at a gala?" He nodded. "Yes. It's time the world hears something real." For a few seconds, she couldn't speak. Then she finally said, "Why me? There are better pianists out there." "Famous ones," he smiled faintly. "Maybe. But none of them made a room full of people forget to breathe." Her eyes stung with emotion. She looked down, unsure how to respond. "Think about it," he said. "I'll have my assistant handle the details." "You'll be paid, of course," she nodded slowly. "All right. I'll do it." As she left the office, her hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't fear, it was disbelief. The driver opened the car door again, and as the city passed by outside, she tried to process everything. The billionaire who had once embarrassed her in front of a crowd now wanted her to perform at his event. She couldn't decide if life was being kind or cruel, maybe both. When she got home, she dropped onto her couch, staring at her piano. The same instrument that had carried her through years of loneliness was now opening doors she never imagined. But with the excitement came pressure. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough for that kind of stage? She spent the next few weeks practicing every night. Her neighbors probably grew tired of hearing the same melody again and again, but she didn't care. She wasn't just preparing for a performance. She was trying to pour her entire life into that song. Each time she played, she remembered her mother's smile, her soft voice saying, "Play what you feel, not what they want." And that was exactly what she planned to do. As the gala day drew closer, the nerves grew stronger. She bought a simple black dress with the little savings she had, practiced until her fingers were sore, and prayed that when the time came, her music would speak louder than her fears. She didn't know it yet, but the song she would play that night would change everything, for her, and for the man who had challenged her to be real. The city lights blinked outside her window as she played late into the night, her music filling the small apartment with emotion and hope. Somewhere across town, in a penthouse high above the streets, Alexander Drayson sat alone with a glass of water beside him. He closed his eyes and heard again the sound of her piano, the one thing that had managed to touch a heart he thought had gone silent forever. And for the first time in years, he smiled. The night of the gala arrived faster than Lena had expected. It felt surreal, like she was stepping into someone else's life. She stood in front of the mirror in her tiny apartment, adjusting the dress she'd bought with what little money she had left. The fabric felt stiff against her skin, but she tried to ignore it. Her fingers itched to play something on the piano, but she forced herself to stay focused. There was no time for practice now. As she applied a little bit of makeup, just enough to look presentable, her mind raced. The words from the meeting with Alexander Drayson kept echoing in her head. One song. Your song. She had no idea what to expect when she stepped onto that stage. She thought about the people in the audience, those who had everything, who were used to perfection. The thought made her nervous, but she pushed it down. She had to trust that the music would speak for her. It had always been her escape, her language when words weren't enough. The car arrived at exactly 6:30 p.m. A sleek black sedan pulled up to her building, and the driver got out to open the door. She felt a rush of cold air hit her face as she stepped outside. Are you ready? The driver asked, his tone polite, almost too calm. Lena nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was ready at all. She climbed into the back seat, and the car pulled away from her small neighborhood, heading toward the city center. As they drove, the streets became busier, the buildings taller, and the lights brighter. The city felt so alive, too alive for someone like her. She pressed her palms against the seat, trying to calm the storm in her chest. When they arrived at the venue, her breath caught in her throat. The building was enormous. It looked like something from a movie, with tall, polished windows and marble steps that led up to a grand entrance. A velvet rope stretched across the entrance, and a crowd of well-dressed people was already gathered outside, chatting and laughing. The driver led her through a side entrance and into a massive lobby that smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. She felt out of place immediately, her simple black dress seeming too plain compared to the sparkling gowns and sharp suits around her. She followed the staff member who had greeted her to a small dressing room off to the side. It was quiet in here, just a small mirror and a chair. She sat down, looking at her reflection, wondering what she was doing here. The assistant knocked on the door and poked his head in. Ms. Morales, Mr. Drayson is waiting for you. They're ready. Lena stood up slowly. Thank you, she said, her voice sounding small in her own ears. The assistant led her through a corridor, past rows of people in tuxedos and into the main hall. The moment she stepped inside, she felt the weight of the room. The space was enormous. Hundreds of guests were gathered, talking, laughing, and sipping drinks. At the front of the room, a large stage was set up with a grand piano waiting for her. She noticed Alexander Drayson standing off to the side, his back straight, observing the crowd with a look that seemed both distant and intense. He was talking to a few important-looking people, but when his eyes found hers, the world seemed to slow down. He gave her a slight nod, and she could feel the attention of everyone in the room shift toward her. It was as if they were all waiting for something. She wasn't sure what that something was, but it was now or never. The assistant handed her a microphone, which she clipped to her dress, and then guided her to the piano. Her heart thudded in her chest as she sat down, her fingers brushing the keys lightly. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The audience quieted down as the spotlight focused on her. She couldn't help but feel a wave of self-doubt, but she forced it away. This was what she was meant to do. She had to play. She had to let the music flow. She adjusted the seat and placed her hands on the keys, her mind racing. She glanced at Alexander once more. His eyes were steady, almost as if he was waiting for her to prove something to him, or to herself. The first note came out, soft but clear, filling the vast room with sound. She began to play the same piece she had played for him in his office, the one she had written so many years ago for her mother. It had always been personal, but now, here, it felt like she was offering a part of herself to a room full of strangers. The music was slow at first, gentle, like a whisper. Her fingers danced across the keys, pulling each note from deep inside her. She wasn't thinking about the audience. She wasn't thinking about anything except the sound, the emotion, the truth she had buried in the notes for so long. As the piece built, she felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. The crowd was silent, watching her every move. She could hear the slight shift of feet, the gentle clink of glasses, but nothing compared to the sound of the piano filling the air. It was a part of her. This song. It was her voice, her grief, her love. She let every note fall from her heart, as if she were speaking directly to them. She wasn't playing for fame. She wasn't playing for applause. She was playing because it was the only way she knew how to speak. When the last note came, it was like the whole room held its breath. For a second, nothing happened. Then slowly, a few people started clapping. Then more. A wave of applause swept through the crowd, louder and louder until it felt like the entire room was shaking. Lena didn't know what to do. She stood up, the sudden rush of emotion making her feel lightheaded. She looked around at the guests, some still clapping, some wiping their eyes. She saw Alexander standing at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of respect, or maybe something more. The applause eventually died down, and the crowd began to move again. People returned to their conversations, but the energy in the room had shifted. Lena couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something had changed. The assistant came up to her and whispered, "Mr. Drayson would like to speak with you." Lena nodded and followed him through the crowd. Her legs felt like jelly, and she had to steady herself on the walls as they walked back toward Alexander. When she reached him, he was waiting by the bar, a glass of water in his hand. He gave her a small, approving smile. "Miss Morales," he said. "That was—" He seemed to search for the right words. "That was something extraordinary," she shrugged, trying to brush off the compliment. "It's just a song," she said quietly, not quite meeting his gaze. He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke again, his voice calm and steady. "I don't think you understand what you just did." She blinked. "What do you mean?" He set down his glass and stepped closer to her, his eyes focused. "That song you played, it wasn't just notes. It was your truth. You gave something real, something raw. People felt that." She didn't know how to respond. It was one thing to play for a small crowd, but this was a different kind of exposure, and it made her feel vulnerable in ways she hadn't anticipated. "I didn't expect this," she finally said, her voice small. "I didn't expect them." Alexander's lips curled into a slight smile. Neither did they. "But that's the point. Music like that, raw and unpolished, is what the world needs." Her heart skipped a beat. "Do you really think so?" He nodded slowly. "I do. And I'm going to make sure they hear more of it. I want to help you, to give you the opportunity to share your music with the world." Lena's mind spun. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," he said. "Just know this, your performance tonight has already changed the way people see you. You're no longer just a pianist in a hotel lobby. You're an artist. And I can help you with that." She swallowed hard, her thoughts a whirlwind. What was happening? Was she dreaming? "Let's take this one step at a time," he said, his voice softer now. "For tonight, just enjoy the applause. But tomorrow we'll talk about your future, together." Lena nodded, unsure of everything but somehow knowing she couldn't turn back now. As the night went on, she was approached by more people than she could count. Journalists, other musicians, investors. They all wanted to talk to her, ask her questions, know more about her story. But through it all, her thoughts kept drifting back to Alexander. His words, his offer. For the first time in years, she felt like something was happening for her. Not because she'd worked hard enough or waited long enough, but because she had simply been herself. As the night came to a close and the last guest filed out of the venue, Lena stood by the stage, her fingers resting on the piano. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. Whatever happened next, she was ready. The days following the gala felt like a dream that Lena wasn't ready to wake up from. The city had never seemed so bright, so full of possibility. She walked through the streets, her head spinning with everything that had happened, and yet, Part of her still felt like it was all too much to take in. When she got home after the event, the apartment felt too small, too quiet. The clink of the keys as she locked the door seemed too loud, too harsh against the silence. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the piano across the room, still in disbelief over the whirlwind of the past few days. The receptionist greeted her with a smile, and soon she was on her way up to Alexander's office again. As the elevator doors opened, Lena felt her nerves rise. She walked down the long corridor, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. When she reached the office door, she hesitated for a moment, then knocked. "Come in," came Alexander's voice from inside. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Alexander was standing by the window again, his back to her. But this time there was a different energy in the room, a kind of quiet expectation. He turned when he heard the door, offering her a smile. "Good to see you again, Lena," he said, his voice warm but controlled. Lena gave a small smile back, though she could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest. She had to make a decision, and soon. The longer she waited, the more it felt like the world was spinning faster than she could keep up with. "Thanks for meeting with me," she said, sitting down across from him. Alexander took his seat behind the desk. "Of course. I know this is a big decision, and I want to make sure you're comfortable with what we're discussing. I'm not asking you to jump into anything right away, but I want to be clear about the opportunities I'm offering you." Lena nodded, trying to keep her thoughts from racing too far ahead. "I appreciate that." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "What I'm offering is a chance for you to showcase your talent to a much larger audience. I have the resources, the connections. What you need is the right platform. You've proven yourself already, but this could be the next step." Lena's mind flickered to the memories of playing at the gala, the applause, the feeling of being seen for the first time. It had been exhilarating but also overwhelming. Could she really step into that world full-time? "I've been thinking a lot about it," she said, her voice quiet. "And I'm not sure I'm ready. I don't know if I want to lose the music I've always had to give." Alexander seemed to understand. He gave her a thoughtful look before speaking again. "I get it. Music has always been your personal space, and I'm not here to take that away from you. What I'm offering is a chance for you to be heard, to do what you love and share it with others. But that doesn't mean you have to compromise who you are. You don't have to lose yourself." Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her. "But how do I balance it all? The music, the crowds, the attention? I've always played because it was a part of me, not because I wanted fame." "You don't have to chase fame," Alexander said, his voice calm. "You just have to let people hear your truth. And that's what makes the difference between someone who's just famous and someone who's truly an artist." His words hit her in a way that made her pause. Could she really do this and stay true to herself? Or was she fooling herself, thinking she could find some balance between the two worlds? She looked down at her hands, her fingers still lightly tapping on the edge of the chair. "I've always dreamed of performing for a larger audience, but I don't know if I can handle everything that comes with it. The pressure, the expectations. It's okay to be scared," he said softly. "But sometimes fear is what pushes us to grow. It's not about having all the answers, Lena. It's about taking the first step, even when you're not sure where the road leads. You've got the talent and you've got the heart. The rest will come." Lena took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been so afraid of losing herself in the process, but maybe this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Maybe this was the chance to push herself, to become something more than she ever thought possible. "What happens if I say yes?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we begin," he replied. "I'll set up meetings with producers, help you get in front of the right people. You'll be able to share your music, your story, with a much wider audience, and you'll have the support you need to navigate this world." Lena stared at him, trying to process everything. She had been waiting for an opportunity like this, but she hadn't realized how much it would change her. The world she had known, the one where she could hide behind her music, was fading away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lena nodded. "Okay, I'm ready." A small smile tugged at Alexander's lips. "I'm glad to hear that. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Lena stood up, her mind clearer than it had been in days. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time she was ready to face it. She had chosen to step into the world, to embrace the challenges, and to let her music reach places she never thought possible. As she walked out of his office, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was just the beginning, and while the road ahead was uncertain, she knew that it was her journey to take. When she stepped back onto the busy streets of the city, everything felt different. She had made her decision, and she was no longer afraid to see where it would lead.